Okay, I think most people have joined us now. So good morning, welcome, and thank you for joining us. My name is John Copps. I'm from Mutual Ventures, and I'll be guiding today's conversation on how to develop your bid for the Department of Education's Fostering Recruitment and Retention Programme. So myself and colleagues at Mutual Ventures are delighted to be involved in this programme as the delivery partner, and we're looking forward to working with you. Today, I'm joined by my colleague Hannah Sampson, the department's Hannah Jones, and colleagues from the Fostering Network, all of whom we will introduce in a bit. Before then, I think it's important to say that fostering is a success story in this country, but none of us disagree that we could do it better. So the aim of this programme is to deliver end-to-end improvements, addressing key weak points in the approval and application process, and to improve retention through investment in the Mockingbird programme. This is about increasing the availability of high quality foster carers in your areas and providing loving homes for our most vulnerable children. The programme includes fostering recruitment hubs, which should cover the foster carer's journey through initial inquiry through to application, and be a centrally run front door across your cluster, with a single point of contact for those inquiring to foster and ongoing emotional and practical advice on the approval process. Individual local authorities will continue to be responsible for preparation, assessment and approval, so no statutory duties are transferred to the hub. However, the DfE's expectation is that local authorities will standardise processes and work towards agreeing standard terms and conditions in line with the national minimum allowances. And then into 2024, next year, the DfE anticipates running a centrally funded communications campaign with clusters, although this will be dependent on the hub being operational. So with that as context, today's discussion will focus on developing your response to the bid. We will give our tips for bid writing and some of the key things you need to think about when answering those 3 questions that you'll have seen. We've already had some questions on the process, and so areas should note that the bidding process is not competitive in the sense that different areas are competing against each other. It is more of a detailed assurance process, but very much dependent on you providing compelling, costed, realistic plans to manage and deliver your programme. So before we get started, I appeal to you to use the on-screen Q&A facility to ask any questions you have, and we'll try and get to as many of those as possible. Any we don't get to, we can answer after the session, and we will share with you along with a copy of the recording for those that missed this. So let me now turn to 2 of our panelists to introduce themselves. Hannah Jones.
Hi, good afternoon. And I know a lot of you have already met me from the interview. So I'm Hannah Jones and I lead the team at the Department for Education that is leading the Fostering Recruitment and Retention Programme.
And Hannah?
Hi everyone, I'm Hannah Sampson. I think I've met some of you as well. I'm one of the coaches who are going to be working on this programme and looking forward to getting to know and work with many of you who are on the call today.
That's brilliant. And so before we go any further, I think it's always worth hearing from people who use our services and reminding ourselves of that. So here's what I think is a really enlightening quote from a foster carer. We're on call 24 hours a day, offering care that, like all parenting, gets little immediate thanks and requires skills that have to be sustained long term. Patience, resilience, compassion, love. And we suffer the profound pain of separation only almost immediately to start again with a new face and do the same thing again. Even if I do say so, we are remarkable. I'm sure everyone on this call will agree with that final point. So tip number 1, remember that foster carers are remarkable and they're at the centre of all this. So let's turn to the question this webinar is seeking to answer. How do you draft a compelling bid? How do you draft a compelling response? So Hannah Sampson, let's start with a general view of bidding and some general advice. What tips do you have when formulating this bid on perhaps any bid?
Thanks, John. I think there are a couple of key general principles that I always keep at the forefront of my mind when I'm writing a bid response. The first one is super obvious and takes you back to being at school. Read and reread the exam question multiple times. I think it's very easy to jump into writing a response without rereading that application guidance a couple of times to really make sure you're capturing all the requirements. So that's top tip number one. Number two, I think, is not to just answer the question and to really think about why it is you're answering that question, what it is you're trying to achieve. So also have that at the forefront of your mind before you get going on writing. I think number three is getting a bid team together. I think having the right people around the table at the right time is crucial to any bid writing, but also especially when there's a tight time scale. So making sure those right people are in the room to help make decisions and get things moving. And then I think number four, again, pretty obvious, but have a plan. Almost work backwards from your deadline of when you need to submit it, to make sure you can get all the key decisions and all the key pieces of information together and drafted, ready for that sign-off process. So have a plan would be my final one.
And definitely on that point, Hannah, it's all local authorities will have different approval processes, won't they? So we know this is local democracy, so you need to understand that, and you need to understand, local authorities need to understand that in their colleagues' councils. So as Hannah says, plan backwards with that.
Exactly.
Lots of Hannahs. Hannah Jones, from a DFE perspective, what sort of overall points would you advise bidders to consider?
Absolutely, thanks, John. So just going back to what you said at the beginning, and just to kind of reconfirm, as John said, this is an assurance process, stage 2 of the bids, and you know we are anticipating that if everyone delivers a successful bid at this stage, then you will be allocated funding. So in terms then of a successful bid, this is about, is this a fully costed, realistic implementation delivery plan within that maximum allocated budget that we sent you, with that clear agreement to proceed from all of the local authorities? So this is about, are you ready for us to give you the funding and get this project underway? And
so Hannah, what would you, from the DFE perspective, what would ensure, high level, what would ensure a successful bid?
So we'll go through in detail each one, but we've got a working partnership agreement, or with a plan then to how that is going to become a formal partnership agreement, that realistic costed delivery plan, and with the timescales, and then the costings meeting our maximum allocated budget, because we obviously do have a maximum amount of money we can spend and we can't exceed that.
Okay, that's really helpful. And as I said to you, the audience, do send through any questions, and we can address them as we go along. So let's turn to the 3 individual questions and look at them in a bit more detail, because I know people will be interested in this. I'll just put the first one on the question on the screen. So the first one is about regional working, and a key part of the programme is the ability to do that and work towards harmonisation of the offer across that footprint. In this question, I guess you've got those 3 bullet points that need answering, and then there's a requirement for the partnership agreement, which we can go into a bit more detail on. So Hannah Sampson, just looking at that, and particularly those 3 bullet points, what would you say in terms of advice to bidders?
So I think for me, I'd look at each bullet point in turn and think how we can answer each of those, capture those within your answer. So for the first one, it would be really demonstrating existing and good working relationships. A lot of the footprints, the clusters already have these. Show the evaluators, show Hannah, where you really have this already. So whether that's previous examples of your RAAs working on that footprint, or improving it in innovation alliances, existing regional agreements, build on those, think about where you've learned lessons as to what works well and what doesn't, and capture that in your response to really demonstrate that you've got this and you do it already.
Yeah, and I think that we all know that the success of programs like this the make and break thing is the relationships between people. So I think that point is about demonstrating what you have, and also where you need to improve perhaps, but just showing that you will be able to put together a partnership that can work together.
I think my second point, John, would be around theory of change. So whether you've established that, if not, speak to your dedicated coaches that I know everyone now has named and contacts for. We can run those workshops for you to really help to articulate your vision and think about what you want to achieve, and really capture that to clearly articulate it within your bid response. So reach out if you don't already have that workshop set up.
Yeah, and I think we can provide materials on that, can't we, through the coaching process. And theory of change, for those who haven't heard of it, very simply, it really is about what you want to achieve and how you get there, and laying that out in a very sort of straightforward flow diagram as a sort of model for that. So yeah, it's helpful for all sorts of reasons, and it's often something that's asked for in bids.
And then I think on that last point, so around your risks, thinking through all the different types of risks, so internal risks, external risks, pandemic, hopefully that never happens again, but those that are in your control, those that aren't, but really demonstrating which are the most important and highlighting those at the forefront, to kind of capture that, you know, what could be the key risks and how you're actually going to tackle those if they do arise.
Thanks, Hannah. And Hannah Jones, we've had a question before this session on the partnership agreement. So can we get to that in a moment? Before that, can I ask kind of what's the DfE looking for in this question?
So this is really an extension, I think, of a lot of the conversations that we had, you know, in the initial interview, around how do you already work as a region and how do you intend to incorporate that then with fostering? And we know there's so many super examples, and we were so, you know, we love those interviews and hearing about what you're already doing. And I think then this is now about taking those wonderful partnerships that you've got in place already and going, okay, so what now are we going to do for fostering specifically? How are we going to approach this together as a region, and making sure that there is buy-in from all of your local authorities to your plan? And I think that that's going to be key for not holding things up later, is making sure there's agreement at this stage.
And it mentions where it mentions harmonisation of your offer. I know there's interest in that.
So we covered this a lot at interviews. I think we're asking local authorities to work towards harmonising the financials, the support offered to prospective carers, because of the benefits that can bring, especially as we move more towards regional working in children's social care. However, this is an ambition and not a set requirement of the programme, and we understand that clusters might not want to focus on it at that stage, and we understand that some clusters are actually already in the space of having this conversation. So as I say, it's an ambition and not a requirement. It's something we would like you to consider how these conversations might begin. I think it's also probably worth just saying the ambition there would be that, you know, that this would be about increasing offers, so that never about taking offers away. And we understand this is often a really long process. Budgets are already set for the next year, so this is an ambition for future regional working and not a requirement for this programme.
Okay, that's clear. So let's turn to the partnership agreement then. So in stage 1, you asked local authority clusters to send an example of an existing agreement. Mm-hmm. And here you're asking, well, the words here are to include a signed partnership agreement.
Yeah. So we understand this is an extremely tight time frame to be doing this on. And we know that obviously a partnership agreement is unlikely at this point to be formalised and signed unless you already had one in place. And so what we are looking for stage 2 is either you might be in the space of a signed partnership agreement, which is great, and thank you for that. If not, then please include a copy of your working partnership agreement. It might be the one that you already used, you know, in stage 1, or one that you've already used across the region, and a statement of where you are up to in terms of drafting a new one. And then if that is the stage you're at, what we'd also like then is a clear plan for individual local authorities who are going to be approving that partnership agreement. So the level of sign off required, what stages are required and where you're up to, and individual timetables for approval. So that could be presented in a table format, for example, with a row for each local authority. So a plan for a development of a formal partnership agreement.
Okay, so that makes sense. So I think just to sort of reassure viewers on here, we will send through what you've just said there in response as part of the follow-up from this webinar. So because I know how anxiety inducing it is when you look at a page like this and you think, oh, I've got to do that and we haven't got that. And so there is an alternative, but it still requires you to demonstrate that you've got a solid commitment to partnership and a plan.
Yeah, it's that demonstration to the commitment that's going to be vital for this question.
That's really helpful. That's really helpful. Shall we move on to question 2? So question 2 is about implementation. So as described in the expression of interest and bid document, says those 3 overarching strands of work, which is the hub, the Mockingbird retention work, and then the campaigning. But the focus for this is more on the regional recruitment hub, support hub, and harmonization of foster care terms and conditions, which you've referred to already. So again, this question is a series of bullet points that you answer, but this implementation really is about demonstrating you've got a compelling, clear, thought through plan. So Hannah Sampson, if you were answering this, how would you respond?
So I think to begin with, it would be thinking through what you want that recruitment hub to be. And that sounds really abstract, but in its sense, what are the values of your hub? What are the things that you want it to stand for? How do you want it to feel when those foster carers are calling and making that initial inquiry and having that at the forefront of your implementation plan and the development of your model? I then think as well, it would be about using that theory of change we spoke about to begin with for question 1 to help to set out your resources and your staffing structure, and then also your success measures. So a couple of those bullet points you can see there all can be captured through your theory of change, so we can utilize that. And then I think as well, it's about having a realistic time frame for each part within your implementation plan. So setting out your design phase, your implementation, your go live, and having timeframes for each part of that. And I will say now that we're pulling together some templates to support you with this. So there'll be an implementation template that we'll be sharing after this webinar towards the end of the week that can help people to really structure that and show those key milestones, tasks, roles, and then who's responsible for them as well.
And I think for me, the gist of these bullet points are start with your vision and work backwards from that to work out what you need to do to achieve that, and then how you need to resource it. And I think, you know, having that being able to show that logical thinking, I think will be something that really appeals to the DfE. Am I right, Hannah Jones?
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's worth saying, you know, on the conversations we had at the interview, you know, we kind of touched on what this kind of vision is going to be. And I think every region we spoke to has got, you know, different, but, you know, a really good sense of what this could do and what this could be for your region. So I'm really excited to see the responses to this in particular. I think kind of if we kind of take it down to 3 kind of really almost basic bullet points of what I'd really like to see with this one that would make it successful. It's going back to, you know, what I said at the beginning about this being an assurance process. So this is about it being a very realistic delivery plan that is costed, about identifying that the staff you need, and actually, you know, for some you might have it in place, so you've identified the gaps that you need, and that you've got the leadership in place and the leadership ready to drive this forward.
Yeah, and I think we had that quote from the foster carer earlier, and I think it's key to think through. I think foster carers are at the center of this. Obviously, it's about providing loving homes for children, but so what, as a foster carer, what do you want your experience to be like?
Yeah.
And therefore, it's not about doing what we've done before. It's about thinking a bit differently, isn't it? Thinking outside that box, and really critically, I think, and it's mentioned in all the bid documents, it's about how foster carers are part of this process and can inform that process and can provide that sort of reassurance or that lived experience that people who are prospective foster carers can benefit from.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, when we originally kind of thought about this recruitment support hub, we envisaged it being staffed by, you know, or having foster carers involved in the staffing, and because, you know, we often hear that they're the best selling points, you know, they're the people who get our recruitment numbers up. So absolutely. And there's just one more thing I wanted to say around this, is around, you know, as we talked about in the interviews, there is obviously a time pressure, and then that comes with it kind of the budgetary considerations, and we're really, you know, wanting you to use the budget. Obviously the way we need it to kind of trigger our internal, you know, grants coming back out to you, we need that fully costed plan, but we really want you to use that budget to show how we can do this at pace. So, you know, we would expect there to be quite a front loaded for this financial year costings around this implementation plan, and we're happy to support that, because we want this to, you know, to be underway with the aim of April 2024, which just feels ever closer.
And I think creatively about the resourcing. So
Absolutely,
it doesn't just have to be full-time people doing full-time, you know, particularly when there's foster carers involved in that. And I don't know, this is a question we can ask to the fostering network when they join us in a minute. It would be nice, I think, to see a connection between the start of the process, which is this inquiry and assessment, and the end of the process, or part of the end of the process, which is around the retention and what happens in what foster carers do, and perhaps the Mockingbird constellations. Is there any sort of axis we can draw with that and benefit from each other's strengths? Can I ask a question as well on the success and performance measures? Because I know the DfE has said that you will be providing some of those in due course at some point. What are you expecting here, Anna?
So we have our internal targets that we're happy to kind of share with you. We'd be hoping for around, as a minimum, I suppose, like a 30% increase in the inquiries that the Recruitment Support Hub would lead to. Using kind of baseline data, we'd hope that would lead to about 20% increase in approvals. And then obviously every region is going to be different in terms of the numbers of foster carers that would generate.
Okay, that's helpful. And I'm sure we'll hear more about that as the process continues. I'm going to turn us to question 3 then. And at this point, we should say hello to our colleagues from the Fostering Network, Jacqueline and Freya.
Hello, hi everybody.
Hello.
Nice to be here. Thanks, John.
Hi, would you like to introduce yourselves and just say hello to everybody?
So I'm Jacqueline Cassidy. I'm the Director for Practice, and Mockingbird sits within the Practice Directorate at the Fostering Network. Freya.
And hi everyone, I'm Freya Burley. I'm the Implementation Manager for Mockingbird at the Fostering Network.
Brilliant. So welcome both. So this question 3 is about costings, and it's about having a compelling, clear set of costings for your bid and your request to the DfE within that, within the boundaries of the sums you've been given. Now, there's different aspects of this. There's a recruitment support hub and there's Mockingbird. So perhaps we should start with Mockingbird, because there's a sort of model that underpins that. Now that funding will be provided through a Section 14 grant, which we can say a bit more about as well. But perhaps, Jacqueline, you want to give, what do people need to know when they're bidding?
Thanks, John. So hopefully people are aware of what Mockingbird is, but just for those of you who don't, so Mockingbird is led by the Fostering Network in the UK, and it delivers a sustainable approach to foster care. So very much an evidence-based model, and it's very much focused around relationships and support for an extended family. So the model nurtures the relationships between children and young people and fostering families, and helping them to be sort of build a resilient and caring community. It's led by a hub home carer who is an experienced foster carer, but doesn't have children in placement in their in their home, and a liaison worker who is from the service. And it's those two people, they're the magic in all of this, the hub home care and the liaison worker, and they help the constellation of families that sit around them and support them with peer support, guidance, sleepovers, and a sense of permanence for that group of people who are in that constellation. So if anybody wants to know more about Mockingbird, or just get a flavour or a sense of it if they're not as familiar as we are with it, we've got lots of videos on our website demonstrating some of the real impact that Mockingbird makes, particularly for children and young people, but also for foster carers, and how it's really helped support foster carers stay within fostering, and how it's helped really change the lives of children and young people.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Okay, well, let's look at this question in the whole, and then we can come back to any points on Mockingbird. So Hannah Sampson, what would you, again, we've got a series of requirements. Oh, sorry. What would you say? What points would you say in terms of answering this?
So I think at the outset, again, going back to some support that we can provide, there'll be a template to help you work out these calculations. So I know, Andis, when I read the Mockingbird model to begin with, it took me a couple of reads. So there'll be some bits from us to help support you to work that out. But then thinking of the different templates, I would be aligning my financial plan with my implementation plan. So making sure that the two talk together. So if I was approaching this, I would definitely start with question 2 to make sure I had that implementation plan, to then be able to flow through to my financial plan. And I would also, again, looking at the implementation plan, which is broken up in phases, I'd do the same for my costings. So I'd consider my cost by phases of work as well to help me really break that down.
Yeah, so I think good structuring on the costs and aligned to the implementation plan. So Hannah Jones, what's the DFE looking for in this response?
Yeah, absolutely. So the detailed costed breakdown for both elements, as said, Mockingbird, we've kind of got that. The recruitment support hub is then going to be linked to question 2 in your implementation plan. If you think about what we need from our end is, the recruitment support hub funding is going to be delivered by a Section 31 grant, which will require, quite a clear MOU to be written, which is setting out the activities that you will undertake in return for funding. So kind of question 2 and question 3 will work together to help us get that the Section 31 grant letter written and cleared internally as soon as possible. I think, again, the weighting is going to be important. We do anticipate the majority of the recruitment support hub funding will be delivered to this financial year, and that's how it's profiled internally as well. Yeah, I think that's everything.
Okay, thank you. So each of these elements should be costed out separately and should relate to the implementation plan.
Yeah.
So the recruitment hub support hub, you'd expect to see various cost elements, and we can help areas with those in terms of what those staffing costs are, what the resourcing costs are, what leadership costs are, what overheads might be. So all those things we can help with. And so when it comes to Mockingbird, I know, Jacqueline, there's a model, isn't there, that underpins that?
Absolutely, there is a very clear model that we work through, and that we'll work through with those who are moved through to the through this stage, and we start working with them. We're hoping to start working with all of you in October, possibly November time, and we'll work through that program with you. So probably for this piece of work, in terms of the EOI, the information that you need to complete that is within this within the document that DFE have provided. We will help you with the rest of it once we're working with you, hopefully, as I say, in October, November.
And so in terms of Mockingbird, Jacqueline, what things would you say that ideally a local authority would have in place already? What conditions are right for Mockingbird?
So I think from our perspective, what's really, really helpful is knowing that you've got the commitment from within your organisation. So we're really, really keen to know that you've got that senior strategic leadership engagement around Mockingbird, and that they're absolutely in favour of starting implementation as soon as you can get going once you have the funding in place. Within the kind of wider team, you may not have appointed a project lead, but it'd be good to know who that person is, that you've identified who that person is, and that you know that they'll have some capacity to do the work that they need to do to support Mockingbird implementation. We'll take you and them through all of the steps, but I think what we're looking for is some early commitment to that process. We'll obviously have an implementation coach who, I think we're using the same words as mutual ventures, so it's a little bit confusing, but we have a Mockingbird coach who will work you through all of this and help you with the implementation. But really it's ensuring that you've got the kind of internal commitment and buy-in to taking this program forward. If you have a program in place that looks a little bit like Mockingbird, sounds a little bit like Mockingbird, maybe uses some of that language, it's really helpful for us to know that, because then we'll work with you on understanding what that looks like, and then how we help you with implementing Mockingbird alongside whatever you're currently doing, and working with you on that. But I think what we're really looking for is that internal commitment at a senior level to Mockingbird, and that you've got the project lead identified and capacity for that person to work with us taking the project forward.
That's really helpful. And so all the financial details you need for this stage are in Annex B. And then, as Jacqueline said, there'll be a Mockingbird coach who will work with you once the funding is agreed.
Just to add, John, we sent an email to all regions. We've just updated the costing slightly from Annex B, just to include the cost of maintaining a constellation, if that's your first constellation, which isn't included in Annex B, and an additional payment to the lead local authority to cover the cost, as Jacqueline described, as the project manager for Mockingbird on the ground.
That's helpful. That's helpful. So everybody should, if you've got Annex B in front of you, then also look out for, find that email, and get in touch if you can't with your coach. So,
just to add, that will all be captured in the documents we'll be sharing as well. So it'll all be one place for you. So the financial template will have all of that in as well. So that should help too.
And Jacqueline?
Just one thing, just from a Mockingbird perspective. Obviously you're applying here as clusters and hubs working together, and we absolutely support that partnership approach, and really looking forward to seeing what emerges from that partnership working. In terms of Mockingbird, we will be working individually with services, and we will be contracting individually with services, so we're interested in what the services within your cluster look like and their sort of state of readiness and to adopt this. But it's just a slightly different approach when we come to Mockingbird. We'll be working with you individually, but we absolutely support the partnership approach across the piece, and look forward to kind of what learning comes out of that, and including learning in relation to Mockingbird.
Yeah, thank you. But application is through the cluster. So
absolutely. So I don't want to confuse things, John. Apologies.
No, that's all right. So we're let's turn to a few questions. So some that have come in, and some that we were sent before. Oh, let's go for the Mockingbird one then. So in relation to Mockingbird, how much project lead time resource is likely to be needed, so we can plan for that?
Yeah, do you want me to take that one, Jacqueline? I think that sort of sits in my experience. So it's the typical kind of appointment of the project lead. So fostering network needs one person, ideally, who's going to be the kind of key link with your Mockingbird coach. They will also require time and capacity to be able to support and really sort of lead what we call our implementation steering group in each service. What's really tricky is that it's not often a kind of set amount per month. The different stages of the implementation will require a bit more time when some of the kind of more intense activity kicks in. We're giving a kind of rough guide of 2 to 3 days a month, but there will be months where more is needed and months where less is needed. There's also, when we start working with you, when you meet with your coach, one of the first things you'll do is start looking at that implementation working group. So it's really, really important that the kind of it's a shared approach across the organisation, so it won't just sit with that project manager. What you're going to need to do is think about actually who else will be involved in this group to make this happen. And a lot of services are able to kind of delegate huge amounts of the kind of project work to working groups across the service, so it doesn't all just sit on kind of one person. So you don't need a kind of dedicated project manager that only looks at Mockingbird. Our experience is typically it's either a service manager, a team manager, or a kind of advanced practitioner or senior social worker. So those roles have all taken on that kind of project lead and now that main link. But yeah, I would say it's 3 to 4 days a month at the sort of intensive side, so it's just freeing up enough capacity for that. But you can work with your coach and work with your implementation group to really decide how will we do this as a sort of service rather than as an individual holding it on their own.
Thank you, Freya. We have another question which is this time on the hubs. So this is quite a broad question, so I think it's just worth clarifying. Maybe Hannah Jones. So somebody asks, are we expected to have a hub for every foster carer to access, or just to start doing them in different
a Mockingbird home, is that relating to? Yeah, that would be our ambition. Currently, so we've got the funding for each local authority to have one new one or one additional constellation. The funding doesn't extend beyond that at this stage. We are in the process of going through rounds for the next spending review, and our ambition is that will extend further. But for this programme, each local authority to have either one new or one additional.
And do you want me to just pick up, Hannah, on the kind of what that process looks like for our existing services? So I think we don't have any services that have got kind of full coverage, even though they might have been running Mockingbird for kind of 5 years already. But we have lots of our services have kind of stated an ambition for a constellation to be available for carers who want one. So that's looking at acknowledging that Mockingbird isn't going to be your only solution. You're going to have a fantastic menu of support for all of your carers. You may well have carers who actually, really won't benefit from Mockingbird because they've got a really fantastic network already, or that they might have young people who've got very different needs and it's not the right fit for them to be part of Mockingbird. So there's no pressure from our point of view for everyone to have to be in Mockingbird, but I know the services that run it have definitely got the ambition to, over time, to see can we have more constellations so that our carers that want Mockingbird are able to access it. The speed of growth is sort of dependent on finding those hub home carers, and so it's a long-term process to grow those constellations. But certainly, Fostering Network and your coach will work with you to grow constellations in order to support more and more children, young people, and carers.
Thank you. So a few more questions. So this program involves 3 different elements. So can local authorities or clusters opt out of any of the elements?
Yeah, happy to take that. So we're clear that this is a holistic programme, that we really want to see these end-to-end improvements through, looking at the whole journey of that foster carer from that moment of initial inquiry. The moment of, seeing the comms campaign really right through that journey to then retention. So the only element that local authorities may wish to opt out of would be the Mockingbird element, but only if they already have an established and well evidenced retention scheme already in place, which would be looking for kind of confirmation of, because we're clear that this is about recruitment and retention. So
that's grand. How about another one for you, probably, Hannah? What if clusters do this exercise and the amount of money they need is higher than the kind of maximum bid amount that you've given?
So first of all, I hope it's not. We've done these costings and added in a bit of a buffer. So we're hoping that what we've sent is a very realistic maximum amount, benchmarking against North East Pathfinder and the setup of the RAAs. We're relatively confident in that funding formula. It has been decided based on the information that we've got, you know, through offset data sets and from yourselves at the interview. So for example, like the number of children looked after in the region. So if you feel that there's an issue, then please, you know, come to us and we can clarify that. But from our work with the North East Pathfinder, the funding, particularly around the recruitment support hub, has been sufficient.
And what happens at the end of this program when the funding from DfE runs out?
So
the costs are still there.
Yeah, no, as we know, this funding period runs to March 2025, and internally in the DfE we're going through processes at the moment of looking to to further funding, but that will be across the next spending review period, so we can't answer that right now. Mockingbird is well evidenced that it's cost effective to local authorities. The recruitment support hub, we do appreciate this is innovative, and this is a new program, and the evaluation for the North East Pathfinder will be done alongside you rolling out that your recruitment support hubs. Recent research does point to this kind of central recruitment agency, more regional, working to boost foster care numbers, and we're hoping that through the course of this program and up to March 2025, you will find across local authorities that the benefit of pooling resources, the benefit in terms of the staffing costs that hopefully will be lower than for each individual local authorities, and the numbers of foster carers that you'll see returning would make this a cost-effective programme. But as I say, from March 2025, that crosses the next spending review period. We are asking for and hoping for additional funding, but this current programme, the funding stops in March 25.
Okay, and so I think a final question before I bring us to a close, and this one's for both the Hannahs. I think maybe Hannah Sampson, you could answer first. Somebody's asked what the outcomes so far have been from the North East Pathfinder.
So some of the insights that we've heard from that are very similar to some of the top tips that we included today about having the right people together from the beginning to help drive this forward. I know they're hoping to go live soon. I'm sure Hannah Jones can give us some more details. Been working with them closely, but I think our top tips correlate neatly to some of the insights and the lessons learned as to how to set up your recruitment hub.
Yeah, absolutely. So the comms campaign is set to go live quite soon. So the recruitment support hub has not gone live yet, and Mockingbird is just being established too. So this, a lot of the lessons that we've learned from the North East Pathfinder so far have been around the regional working aspect, and supporting and encouraging those relationships.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think when it comes to the North East Pathfinder, then it's mainly about, so the lessons are sort of on process at the moment. It's not yet gone live, so we can't truly say about the outcomes, but they will certainly be feeding into this program as we go along.
I think it might be worth as well saying, John, and we reference this a lot throughout the interviews, that due to the urgency of placement sufficiency, we've presented this as a kind of a continuation of the Pathfinder, and we're really excited by the regions we've got and the lessons that we can learn from you as well, looking towards a national picture in the future and how this could work across all local authorities in England, and we see the work you're doing is not replicating the North East Pathfinder, but actually innovating yourselves and providing evidence to us of what works best in fostering across those regional relationships.
Well, it's great, Hannah, to end on a note there that brings the sort of ambition of the programme in the longer term to life a bit. So I'm going to bring us to a close and thank everybody for their time. So it's important to remember the purpose of this work for foster carers and to achieve better outcomes for children. For people who've got additional questions, please talk with your coaches, and they'll also be in touch in the coming days with all the templates and the documents we've referenced in this session. So we'll also share a recording of this webinar for anyone who wasn't able to attend. And just to note that this will be one in a series of webinars and learning events we plan to hold during the duration of the programme. So that'll include sessions on some key themes, as well as sessions for colleagues in different areas to speak to each other and swap notes. So we'll be in touch with details of that in the coming weeks. So finally, say good luck to people who are listening with their bid, and thank you to panelists for their time, and thank you to you for joining us.